I think we're here. We had that screen up that had athletic training, kinesiology. We were discussing the categories for FOS. Is that where we left off? Alan, do you remember? We had the tabs at the bottom.
Yes, thanks. Yes, welcome back, everybody. Appreciate you coming back. Hope you had a okay pillow last night in the hotel room, and good water pressure, and some barbecue, continental breakfast, stale pastries.
Alan, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, it's just as well because I wasn't saying anything at all important. Excuse me, I hope my voice holds out again today. Yes, thank you for coming back. Where we left off yesterday, as I recall, was we need to decide what the tracks are going to be. Are we going to stick with an education track? And if so, can we get those aligned with what TEA is expecting for our teachers to pass the certification exams? Do we want to have a separate track for exercise science, a separate track for general kinesiology, or can one field of study serve for both of those? Do we want to keep athletic training off the table or develop a field of study for that? Before, in previous meetings, we decided to keep pre-professional programs in sports management excluded from the field of study, but if someone wants to revisit that, you can. Then after we've determined what our tracks will be, then we can get down to the brass tacks of starting to plug in the courses into the field of study based on the excellent discussion we had yesterday through the public comments.
Do you want to bring up that slide that had all the categories at the bottom?
Sure. These are the institutions and the various program names as best as I could call them out from the catalog. I'm sure this is imperfect. From this, it seemed to me, in my inexpert eye, because I'm not a kinesiologist, that the dominant tracks, if we exclude the health and wellness tracks, because we've already got a health and wellness field of study, so we don't need to go there. We already have a health services field of study, so we don't, which is like allied health. We don't need to go there. We already left out sports management and pre-professional, so I left those out. And what remained from this list, as I saw it, were athletic training, which is only at 4 institutions, and exercise science, and general kinesiology, and of course, teacher certification. So I just brought those up to start a discussion. Scott.
Well, Alan, in our field, sport management is the subdisciplinary term for the, and you sort of mentioned pre-professional. I mean, we have multiple pre-professional tracks, and in our university, ours is called pre-rehab sciences because it's designed for the physical medicine, AT, because AT will be master's level in the future. OT, PT, physician's assistant, chiropractic. So that would be the only one, or one of the ones I would say that we maybe should include under kinesiology, some sort of pre-medicine, or another word, or pre-allied health sort of track to go along with our kinesiology exercise science, or what we are calling the science track here.
Angela?
Well, I think going back to our discussion right at the end of the day yesterday, I think part of the muddling problem that we're having is the CIP code that has just been listed for everything. And if you just tag on to what Dwayne just said, and just look at Texas State, for example, you've got multiple things under one CIP code, and then you go down to Sam Houston, or you go down to TWU. There's a lot of things dumped into that same CIP code, and I think that's the confusing part. And as I mentioned, we've tried, and I think this is where the coordinating board has to help us out, the pure science-based programs that are really preparing these individuals to go to OT, PT, nursing, med school, et cetera. Those are really exercise physiologist-ish, if you will, tracks, and those are the ones that we're kind of calling pre-professional, even though they're not maybe labeled that uniformly across the state. Those really should be 260908. And those would be very simply almost solely geared to people going to graduate school versus the more exercise science or kinesiology, because depending upon the institution, those terms are used interchangeably. They're probably better positioned at the 310505. And I think the other thing that we need to think about is if we can move to the 26 at the four-year institutions, especially, what that means is then they qualify for federal funding under the STEM disciplines. And that's a huge difference. And I think Dr. Peoples is amenable at least to thinking about that conversation, but I think that's the group of programs that this field of study probably shouldn't address because of all the science classes that are prerequisite to get into those graduate programs.
I would agree with that, and I would think that pre-professional, pre-allied health, whatever you want to call it, the sport management, and I would say even the athletic training shouldn't be affected by this FOS. I don't think.
Isn't athletic training going to masters only?
Yep.
Yeah, or at least masters should be an athletic trainer. So that really, to me,
Right.
shouldn't be included here.
Well, I think the athletic training may be its own FOS on its own because
I'm
of
saying.
such a specific degree level. But there's two types of athletic trainers. There's the National Certified Athletic Trainer, that is the master's degree now. They're done by doctoral programs and work on their master's degree. Then in the state of Texas, they have licensed athletic trainers.
Yep.
That the degree is not the same. It's more practical aspect, still has certain classes that are required. So I think that's where things from the two-year school could go to the four-year school. But I think there's more specialists in that area than this group on that specific topic.
So just like the sport management, I think the athletic training should have their own FOS, and this is not the purview of this committee, in my opinion.
The numbers are small for athletic training. I don't think I have the full number of graduates for that, but it's pretty small. And
What you'll find is there are certain programs that are listed on there. Is my guess is that they are the ones that are training for the Board of Certification, that they can take their certification exam. The ones that have student trainers that work through in a practicum athletic classes base would not necessarily be a degree program, but they would have the degree. They would have the classes they need to take the license test for the state of Texas.
Well, A&M is on there, but that's not accurate because their athletic training degree is the master's. It's a 5-year program. It's a 3+2. So their undergraduate degree is kinesiology.
And ours is on there, but we're already in the phasing out phase of that. So we hadn't accepted students in that program in the last year. So that's going to a master's level. And some programs still have listed as sport medicine or something like that. So they're doing what Scott's saying. They may be a kinesiology major under exercise science, but they're taking the specific classes that they need so they can sit for the Texas licensure and pass it. And so you're not going to see it listed as a degree. But so I don't think this FOS really fits that at all. Be a hindrance for them. And I think if there is going to be one, it needs to be one specific to them. And this room should be full of athletic trainers.
I think the two-year schools do teach some sports medicine classes that would transfer
Right.
into sports medicine. So I think there needs to be the conversation on both sides again, because I think if we look at if athletic training does have an FOS, you're going to find more classes just like we have that are common low-level classes that could easily fit in.
Sure, I agree.
Angela, to your point about the SIP code and the 26 whatever, we have a kinesiology degree that has both the education track and the exercise science track, so I'm not sure that SIP code would apply to that degree. Not sure
It probably wouldn't. When we completely changed the programs at Tech, we did away with teacher education because the similarity of courses were not there. But ours is very focused on science-based classes. If you just look at the curriculum, that's pretty much all that's there. And so because y'all's is configured differently, it probably 310505 is probably where y'all need to be. But maybe it might be different at the master's and the PhD level at A&M.
Before the day is over, after we get our field of study specified, or before, if you like, I need to get some definitive word from the committee about which CIP codes these fields of study will cover, because we need to be clear to the institutions when it comes time for them to report field of study completers, what programs are covered by by this. So as far as I could see, these were the CIP codes that are in the general family of what we're talking about. And I'll need to get a yes or no answer from you of should our field of study cover this. That's a question that we can address after we've picked the courses, or we can do it beforehand if you want to limit your choice now. But we've got exercise physiology, which is the one we've been discussing. There's only 2 baccalaureate programs in that. Of course, we wanted to cover kinesiology and exercise science. I'm hoping you'll say yes to that. And then we've got sports and fitness administration management, which is what we've also been talking about. And I'm not sure what to do with this, health and physical education, fitness general. There's only 1 program in that. Is that the same thing, give or take, as kinesiology? Or
I'll
the same
comment
thing,
on that.
give or take, as
Everything
health
in
and wellness?
31 is kinesiology. That is the SIP code that represented our field when we pretty much, as departments, we're a whole college because we had health, PE, recreation, and dance all together. So anything with 31 is kinesiology. It's just various flavors of it. And because it exists in 26 is because universities like Tech or Cal Poly schools, because of vagaries of politics, are in a natural sciences college. So they needed a science SIP code. And naturally, their programs drifted away from educational prep toward science-based, research-focused academic programs. And it's fine. All those fit kinesiology, really. And let me do some more research before I comment some more.
We have several topics on the table, so I think we need to kind of bring this back to maybe focusing on the programs we want to select to have an FOS first, if that's the wish of the committee.
I don't want to go against the chair, but I did pull up this paper, and we exist in digit, maybe not in Texas, but 09, because there's sports communication in the business realm. And code 131314 is physical education and coaching. So there might be some universities in the state that have kinesiology programs that are using that SIP code. 131314 is physical education and coaching. It exists under 1313, which is teacher education and professional development. So you see, we exist in all these places because we exist in all these unique, different college arrangements and universities, and that's part of the difficulty of saying this one SIP code has to be that, because the unintended consequences of this SIP code reporting system for the federal government is all the unique programs that all our universities created, a lot of them are really good plans by the faculty, but they're mediated through the politics of the university. So we exist in all these different places, and it's not the job, and that's basically what the SIP people said, is that this is not a coding system designed to force academics to do certain things. It's just a way for us to sort of count stuff, at least from the federal government perspective, to who graduates in what area. And for a very diverse field like ours, it's a mess. because we exist in 9, 13, 26, 31, and 51.
Okay, the reason why I didn't put that on the list is it doesn't look like Texas has any baccalaureate programs in 13, 13,
Do we have any
14.
kinesiotherapists? Because 51, 23, 21 is kinesiotherapy. Some of our departments across the country were very close to VA hospitals, and VA hospitals wanted to hire our graduates before PTs because they were a little more reasonable and pretty much knew the same thing. So there is a national board certification for kinesiotherapy. I don't think we have them in Texas, but
Okay, what was that
might be
CIP code?
51, 23, 21. In the health profession, 51 is health professions.
We don't have any programs in that either in Texas, or at least standalone undergraduate degree programs. There might be certificates, there might be concentrations, but we don't have a degree program in that, so we don't really need to address it, at least today.
Just to speak to what Dwayne said, when I got to Tech, our physical education, teacher education classes, their zip code was 13. We don't have any of those classes anymore. They weren't, but they were all were subsumed underneath what was then called an exercise and sports sciences degree. So I bet if we all went back to our respective institutions and dug into the actual CIP codes for the courses we're currently now teaching, I think we would be very surprised. I would agree that there are not degree programs in that. We have a lot on our campuses that have those prefixes.
Well, this is interesting. These are the, if I just type in physical education, programs named that, we have Prairie View has one in 13, 13, 14. So does Texas State. So does UT Austin. So does UT Tyler. Other schools have presumably very I'm sorry, those are all master's programs. That's why I didn't have them on my list. The only bachelor's degree program called physical education is in the 31 code, and that's at UT Austin. Physical culture and sports.
Could you bring your list back up?
Sure. Which list?
That one? So we're trying to decide of those that are listed in on that list that this FOS or one of the FOSs would have to abide by? Is that the?
Yes.
I want to say again that I don't think the education track should be part of the FOS. It's too detrimental to the students who don't get what they need to meet the TEA requirements.
Is that a motion?
This is Rex Peoples again. He's our Assistant Commissioner for Academic Quality and Workforce.
So Alan and I were talking about the results of yesterday's meeting after it was over upstairs for a few minutes. And so I guess I'm trying to figure out what requirements of TEA you're talking about.
Well, I reached out to our teacher education folks last night, and I'm going to have to pull this up. But there are certain modules that have to do with ethics, English language learners. Let's see if I can see this real quick. Technology training, field-based hours that they get in our lower level course. They also enter the TEA portal, and none of the courses they take in the discipline that are taken before they get in the portal don't count towards their hours in terms of their field-based hours. So it's really, really complicated. We have one person in our college that deals with all of the TEA requirements. And I'm only speaking for our program, so I don't know about anybody else's education program. But we have a lower level introductory course for our teacher education students where they get in the portal, they start generating their hours, they get some of the modules. And my understanding is that the modules, the ethics modules, the English language learner, and whatever these other modules are, can be incorporated in any number of courses. It's not like, oh, it has to be in this course. So if there is a course that we include in the FOS that would take the place of this lower level course, we don't know if they're getting the right modules because they're not specific to a specific course.
Okay, so are we talking about, in full disclosure, one of my other duties as assigned is to serve as the coordinating board's representative to SBEC, the State Board for Educator Certification. So I've served on that for about 4 years now. So I'm somewhat familiar with this, although it's a Byzantine world of stuff. And pages and pages of teaks and all kinds of stuff that I won't even pretend to have mastered by any stretch of the imagination. But so essentially we're talking about the connection to the certification exams in the end, because a lot of what you mentioned in terms of ethics and a couple of those other areas, they strike me as being parts that are already required in what they call the PPR, which is the separate 18 hours of education that you take in order to be certified through a traditional educator preparation program is, and PPR stands for professional practice or something, professional in pedagogy, I don't know. I can't remember now. But it's really sort of the purely, if you will, education aspects of it. The pedagogy piece of it includes classroom management and all of the other things that the legislature has required. They teach something about. They just added a couple of more requirements in this last legislative session onto that. One of the reasons why legislation also passed that removes the 18-hour limit on those. So remember, there was legislation that just passed that brings back education degrees. And you know, I don't know how many of you are like me that have been around long enough to remember when Texas still had bachelor's degrees in education. That was done away with in the mid to late 1980s. Yeah, and legislation just passed that would allow institutions to offer bachelor's degrees in education again. So, and it lifted the 18-hour limit that was, at the time those bachelor's degrees were eliminated in the 1980s. There was also a limit placed on the number of hours that you could offer in education at 18 or 24, but it's really 18 hours of coursework and then 6 hours of student teaching is what it really comes down to. It can be much more, it's been made much more complicated than that, but that's really what it means. And, but those limits have been lifted, which then is going to be interesting to see what happens with departments of education and colleges of education around the state and what they do to bring back education degrees, and then how that affects the fields and so forth. So part of what you're saying, and Alan and I talked about this, and so I was just trying to make sure that what we're talking about are elements that are found in the certification exams and as you point out, that's an all-level certification of EC through 12 for physical education. And so are we talking about the certification exam, or are we talking about elements that are found in the PPR? Because if it's a PPR, everybody takes that. You want to be certified to teach, you got to take that regardless of your field. But you only take that certification if you want to teach EC through 12 physical education. So, so that was my sort of quick, but I sort of see where you're coming from now. So thank you.
You want to repeat that motion, please, Jay?
I move that we remove the education track from the FOS.
Second.
Is there a second? No? Okay, motion fails, I guess. Yeah, can we? Well, I'm not as familiar with the I understand the SIP code thing to some degree, and the money behind it and funding and that kind of stuff. Can we go back to the list? That has the areas that we're trying to decide if they're going to fall into. Right now, we have two that we have agreed on, the exercise science and the all-level teaching one. So we said at a previous meeting that the pre-allied health wouldn't fit, and we said sport management should have its own or be through business. So your other list that had the, so there's one with exercise physiology, there's one school. I mean, that's an undergraduate program called exercise physiology? Where is that?
Those are the names of the SIP codes. They're not the names of programs.
Oh, okay.
And
All right.
I'm sorry, these aren't the names of the tracks. These are the various CIP codes that
Okay.
we'll need to decide.
Okay, that's where I was confused.
The tracks, I'm sorry, it's just impossible to see the little tabs down here at the very bottom where my cursor is. I have kinesiology, teacher cert, exercise science, and athletic training. There seems to be a consensus that we could leave out athletic training. Okay, shall we boot that?
Yeah, can I have a motion on that? Do we have to vote on that? Not on athletic training. We did the pre. Okay. Is there a consensus that we not include athletic training on the FOS? Anybody against that? Okay, so is that okay, Rex? All right. Okay.
Okay.
So that's a consensus that the FOS not include athletic training. So what we have now is the education track and the science track.
Education, exercise science, and kinesiology. So general kinesiology. So a question might be, should we conflate exercise science with general kinesiology or keep those separate as two separate tracks? The courses here, I mean, look at the courses back to back. They're not that dissimilar. Of the courses that are most popular here, I'm not saying these need to be in the FOS, but the ones that are most popular are these, and here are their ACGM equivalents. Okay, take a good look at those. Got foundations, A and P, concepts, algebra, chemistry, physics, first aid, chemistry, nutrition, and then here's exercise science. Of the most popular courses, they're A and P, foundations, concepts, algebra, psychology, chemistry, physics, nutrition. So the courses aren't, I mean, there's some variation, but they're not too dissimilar.
Well, no offense to the sciences and the maths and everything else, but I think the biggest concern for this committee is the kinesiology courses. Because if we have a FOS and we say these are the ones that are coming in, that we're going to have to do something with those when they come in. I mean, we haven't even talked, we have AMP 1 and 2 on both plans. There could be some others, but that really, to me, is not the biggest issue. The biggest issue is what's the similarities in kinesiology prefix courses. That's just my perspective, and those do look very similar.
they really are similar, because if your unit's in a science college and you use that SIP code, and it's called exercise physiology, again, through the vagaries of politics, it really is a kinesiology science-based curriculum. It's not just that one subdiscipline of our field. So they really are almost identical. The trick for us to decide is, do we want to have this general one, or do we want to have a couple more that really do focus more physiology for the physiological pre-allied health people, and the more physical science for the OT, PT, rehab people, and have them as part of separate fields of study in our field, or not? Or just have one sort of baseline one for these small numbers of students that come from transfer. don't jump right in, know where they're going right from day one.
So in the interest of moving this along, I move that we just have a single one.
The exercise science
That
would
gets
also
lumped in
cover
with
just
kinesiology.
general kines.
I
Well,
would
just have
second
a-
that.
Just a general kines that includes exercise science because of the similarities in the courses.
Okay, so we have a motion to include that general kinesiology with the exercise science. Is that right, Chuck?
Well, I'm thinking of it the other way around, but yes.
Yeah. And discussion? Yes, ma'am.
Would that continue to exclude the pre-professional, heavily science-based?
Yeah. Tim?
I'd just like to also comment that the ACGM doesn't allow us to teach that many different courses in depth at the present time. So we need to keep it general, in my opinion, because that's all we're able to teach at the 2-year level is the basics. We don't really have the ability to teach more in-depth courses because they're not in the ACGM. So we need to keep it together because we're very general at the lower level. Thank you.
Just a question, are we then going to have a kinesiology field of study for pre-allied health, or there is no field of study handshaking arrangement for transfers that want to go into highly specialized kines programs aligned with pre-OT, PA, or whatever?
I would like
Right.
Rex to chime in on that because it's so diverse, because there's so many different areas you can go in, from dentistry to whatever. I don't even know if you could create one that would cover all that.
So Alan and I have talked about this, and I've listened to the committees and read the comments about this and so forth. And I think that, at the outset, things were sort of broken down into this exercise science, kinesiology, physical education, if you will. But then also the fact that a lot of the programs also are preparatory programs for occupational and physical and other allied health science degrees. And I think that they're probably different enough that, and I'd like to hear what the committee thinks about this, but it seems to me that they're probably different enough that that's something we should explore at a later date. And then also dig into whether it's, frankly, whether it's worth exploring or not at a later date in terms of transfers and students and how that works out, and get some more information about that pathway, if you will, before we try to jump into that. And that may even actually call for a separate FOS committee that's made of people who really focus on those areas. And in some, there's a lot of overlap between the two, like I think at Texas State. But in others, there may not be. And so I think that that may be the better way to go, and I would be interested in y'all's.
And I think one thing you'll find, Rex, if you do, I agree, and I've been a department chair for 14 years and now undergraduate program coordinator for the last 3, so basically the same job. But from the new master's program in athletic training, PT, OT, medical, dental, consistently A&P 1 and 2, at least 1 chemistry and 1 physics and 1 statistics, almost always across those plans. But here's the problem. If you make that FOS and probably foundations, it's about the only one you're going to see that's consistent, or intro class of some kind, you have those 6, and if that's the FOS, then they can't take any other undergraduate courses beyond their core. But especially like PT, there was a lot more undergraduate sciences that you have to have just to be able to apply. So that's going to be a real challenge. But I definitely think, I agree with you, I think that should be done at a later date. Angela?
Well, to link into what Randy just said, what we do at Tech, and I think some of our colleague institutions do as well, is we have set up our program with so many of the lower division classes being in those sciences that are exactly the prerequisites to get into not only the upper division courses that we teach, but also PT, OT, Master of Athletic Training, etc. And I think that one of the best things that could serve our students across the state better would be for everybody to do something similar. You just contact anyone and find out what their requirements are, and literally, we map our program. Anyone that says they're interested in those, we make sure they get those courses. And then the student gets ready to apply, and they have no missing prerequisites. And that's one of the reasons that our program is so popular, is we make sure that they've already taken those, and almost 100% of those are taught by other people than us across campus in the sciences. And the other thing that I think might be really helpful to tag into this, and I mentioned this to Carolyn after our meeting yesterday, I think going back to the information that Alan shared yesterday morning at the very beginning about taking so long to graduate, I think one of the things that could help those students possibly as much as anything would be for 2-year and 4-year institutions to work on articulation agreements. So if South Plains and Levelland comes to us and say, we have Johnny here who wants to go into PT school, what should we advise Johnny to take transferring into your kinesiology program? We'd say all of these sciences, because that's the way Johnny's going to get into PT school. And so I think a resurrection of some of those articulation agreements between 2-year institutions and 4-year institutions to share what we've already experienced and how to build out that programs could be very helpful to students.
Thank you, Angela. I would be interested to hear what Alan or Rex has to say about maybe the FOS versus the old 2+2 plans. And maybe is the FOS...
Well, so an FOS is a 2+2. It's a statewide articulation agreement as opposed to an institution by institution statewide articulation agreement. I mean, when you get right down to it, that's the effect of it. And you know, they were put into law in the first place because, frankly, because of the vast ineffectiveness of articulation agreements. I mean, if you know, we've run a survey on this every year for some time now, and what we know is that the average number of articulation agreements at 4-year institutions is, I think, at last survey was 38. And if you just had, you know, articulation agreements with in your top 20 transfer majors with your top 5 institutions, that'd be 100. And so, on average, we don't even come close to covering it. And you know, and I've worked on articulation agreements before, and there's nothing wrong with them. And when they're good, and they work, they're great. But part of that problem is that keeping them up to date, and given the fact that we have 61 systems of higher education in this state, and trying to articulate across that, and you know, and I think I've probably said this as group before, but I had a vice chancellor of one of our major systems tell me one time, you know, I got, you know, X number of colleges in this system, and I can guarantee you that no 2 of them do anything alike. And so we don't even act systematically within our systems. And that poses, you know, and as Alan points out all the time, I mean, that poses huge problems for people. It costs the state a lot of money, it costs students a lot of money and time. And, you know, so if we can gradually come to some agreement about these things, I think we'll be better off. And so while I think articulation agreements are good, I also know from both my own personal experience and from all of the data that I look at on these, that good ones are few and far between. We did a sampling of articulation agreements, and a lot of them, while they might be pages long, they amount to, if you send your students to us and they're qualified, we'll take them. Well, you don't need an articulation agreement for that. That's true everywhere you go. If a student wants to come there and they're qualified, you'll take them. All right? And what I mean by qualified is they meet all the admission standards, whatever those might be, and so forth. So some of them are that vague and that general. Some of them are actually very good, by the way. I mean, I've seen some really good ones that cover all the bases and actually provide students with a clear pathway. But I was struck once by a lot of work that was done in the Houston area, producing all these transfer guides. And at the top of every one of them, in really big, bold letters, was recommended. It was not a guarantee for a student in there anywhere. And so the student could take that, and even then, if the student from South Plains decides they don't want to go to Tech, they want to go to UT Permian Basin or University of North Texas, then all of that stuff they could have taken, not all of it, but some of it could have been taken in vain. So You know, and I think the problem that Texas faces with is one that most other states don't face to a great extent, because nobody has 61 systems of higher education. I think the most you can find anywhere is maybe 4 outside of the state of Texas. So it poses a really interesting challenge to how you make stuff work at the undergraduate level, and particularly not really the lower division level of the undergraduate level, not really the upper division level at all. Because I mean, personally, I think that by the time you get to be a junior, you really need to figure out what the heck you're going to do, and that's where the programs really have, and really traditionally, that's where programs have really put their sort of spin and flavor on the program anyway, and I think that's perfectly justified. So it's a real mixed bag, I think, and again, I think it's one of those things where it works, but it often doesn't work. And they're hard. They're just hard to maintain. They're hard to keep up with. I mean, if you've ever worked on one, you know how much time and effort goes into it, and then about the time you think it all done, somebody somewhere says, well, I think we ought to change this course, and that happens. So I long ago became a believer in the idea that while Texas doesn't necessarily have a single system, it has 61, there are times where we need to act as though we have a single system. And I think in this case, this is one of them, because we know that transfer between 2- and 4-year schools is problematic, but it's actually even more problematic to transfer from a 4-year to a 4-year. So, and it's even more problematic to transfer from a 2-year to a 2-year, by the way, but we're also working on that end. So,
Thank you, Rex.
Well, seems we have 2. And I guess the question now is, do we want to accept those as is? Or do we want to introduce or entertain adding additional classes to one or both? As amended.
Charles motion and second.
Oh, I'm
We
sorry.
only have 2.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry.
Kinesiology, exercise science, and the education track.
Well, last
Never
night before
voted
we,
on the,
I'm sorry.
we had a motion and a second, and we never voted on that. We were still in discussion. Yeah.
Yes. Point of clarification, are we having like kinesiology / exercise science? Are we renaming the exercise science kinesiology?
Majority of the departments in the country are named kinesiology. I would be comfortable with that, but again, that ties some departments' hands, because, I mean, I came from California before I was here, and our exercise science degree program was called exercise physiology, not because of that had zip code, it's because the natural sciences dean wouldn't allow anything else to be a science unless it was a natural science. So I wouldn't want, I'd like to have both names unless other people think otherwise. I prefer kinesiology, but I feel I don't have to tell everybody else what to do.
Anybody not comfortable with that?
Is that, that's what you said, Alan. I wasn't sure of history. I've been at all these meetings, but I don't remember exact. I think we just called it the science track. I didn't know if we really said exercise science.
Well, it says on here, proposed 2018 FOS curriculum for kinesiology and exercise science, education track, science track. So are we trying to decide if that's what it should be, or? And I'm happy with what this says. I mean, I think that,
I'm not sure we ever really voted on the name. We just said that one would be a education track and one would be a science track. So I guess I would, we could make a friendly amendment to, if we're agreeing with Chuck's motion, to decide what to call it to. Is that okay?
The original one that went out for public comment was just called Science Track. Right, it was called Curriculum for Kinesiology and Exercise Science, Science Track, and Kinesiology and Exercise Science, Education Track. We can change that.
I'm fine with
Okay. All right, so,
Both kinesiology, exercise science.
yes.
Has education flavor and one has more science.
That's true. Well, we may want to amend that one, I don't know. Well, we can decide to change a name, but at this time, there's a motion on the floor that that FOS, exercise science, would encompass kinesiology as well. Correct, Chuck? That the motion is about the kinesiology, exercise science track cover the general kinesis as well. Is that what you're saying? Okay. So can, question?
Just want to go back. Would you mind putting the exception as a part of your motion? What's excluded?
The pre-allied health?
The
Allied health degree program.
those exclusive of the... It's basically our last vote at our last meeting. But I don't want it to get lost.
Well, it's listed at the top of the proposed FOS curriculum. It says the proposed kinesiology FOS does not apply to pre-professional programs, those leading to the certification in physical therapy, occupational therapy, chiropractic.
So that's in the record already, so we don't need to. Okay. All right, so those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed? One. Abstain? None. Motion passes.
Okay, so are we going to call it science, kinesiology and exercise science : science track, or just call it Sue?
I think that's what you voted.
Okay. Be clear, thanks.
Okay. Now we have two. Would entertain any questions or motions looking at what's currently with our friendly amendments of adding 1164 to the education track. Is there any other ideas or suggestions to add to either one of these FOS?
Now, if this helps clarify things or muddy things, I don't know, but I took the liberty of plugging in the courses from our previously approved field of study into this template to show how things might overlap with the core curriculum, okay, and also do a running semester credit hour count. So we have in the general core 6 hours of life and physical science. I plugged in the 4-hour courses in A and P, presuming that students could do that to cover the core. I plugged in general psychology for the social and behavioral sciences part of the core at 3 semester credit hours. That leaves us with six courses, 18 semester credit hours available for general FOS courses. In there, I plugged in foundations, concepts, the choice of either first aid or care and prevention, and 3 hours of skills courses, including our new physical fitness and wellness, which we approved yesterday, of including in that category. That would give us a 23-hour field of study, which is the same as what we had before, and would still allow 6 more hours of free courses, either free electives or courses that the college recommends or courses that you may want to add to the field of study. But we've got 6 hours left, which is fine. We don't have to fill it up if we don't need it. And there's still plenty of room left for multiple choices for students here in the core curriculum. So that's what it looks like for the education track. Same thing for
Alan?
Same thing for the sciences track here.
Alan, before you go into science, I need a point of clarification. On letter M of the public comments and the vote, remove general psychology from education track.
Okay, right.
I have that as a check.
We didn't remove it. That was a question, but we did not.
This is the
remove it.
education track, yeah.
I'm just asking for a point of clarification because
Did we? don't-
I
did we
have
do
a
that?
check by that, but I could be wrong. I'm just asking.
It doesn't ring a bell. Did we remove
We did not.
psychology?
That was a comment, but we did not make that. That was a suggestion by one of the public comments, but we did not
Okay,
vote that out.
okay.
I just have a running track of what was, passed and not, and I could have made a mistake. I was doing several things at the same time. Thank you, if you're sure.
Tim?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to add the 6 hours of the new courses that we just added to the ACGM yesterday to the education track, which would be the education, team sports, and education of the individual sports.
I think the wording was teaching of, yeah.
Teaching of individual sports, teaching of team sports. I think that's correct, Henry, correct?
Yes. A question for you, would you want those to be counted as required?
They would be electives, but they would be the 6 hours that students could take possibly to meet that 6 hours that they could get in their field of study at a community college.
I'll second.
So discussion. If they're approved, they're in the FOS, then they're not electives. Is that right, Rex? I mean, they can elect to choose to take them or not, but if they take both, and that is in the FOS, then all the schools that wherever they transfer are going to have to accept both. That's, I'm not fussing, I'm just saying that's a reality.
They would be accepted as lower levels courses.
I know.
Correct.
Yeah, gotcha.
Now, do you want to include both of those separately in the field of study or make a choice between choose one of the two? Okay.
Both.
I'll second.
Discussion?
Are those more lecture-based or are they lecture/hands-on?
They would be both.
So could they not be included as part of that laundry list of classes potentially?
No, because those courses don't specifically go to education. These courses would be going to the education of teaching teachers how to teach individual sports and team sports.
Speaking on behalf of A&M, Corpus Christi, and Kingsville, I worked there too, and I know I talked to Chris last night about those courses. The current courses that are coming in are already going to, if we accept those, are going to take the place of some upper division stuff, and we're willing to do that. But 6 more hours would really be challenging. I would be more in favor of either or on one of those, like we did with first aid and camp prevention. But that's just I know you have your motion. I'm not changing your motion, but I'm just saying, from my perspective, 6 more hours would be really challenging.
Yeah, I agree with that. We offer the individual and team sports for 3 credit hours, so it'd be a lot easier to accept that type of term as opposed to the 6 hours.
I'll amend my motion to either or.
Well, I wasn't trying to change it. I'm just opening the floor to discussion, but okay.
Reason I would want to do both is if you look at the ACGM and what we can teach at a community college level that y'all need is very few courses.
Yep.
And so if you look at those courses on the list here, that's pretty much all we can teach because we're handcuffed with ACGM not allowing us to teach those courses y'all need.
No, I get you. Totally.
So as we add these 2 courses to the ACGM, that gives us the ability to give students hours at our institution where they could transfer those hours to your institution that would benefit the students.
No, I agree. I was just talking, but.
Tim, you want to stay with your friendly amendment?
I will change my amendment back to both courses unless there's a discussion of another course that could be put back into include the 6 hours. We don't have much in ACGM that I can find that we could teach to get this other 3 hours.
Okay, so do you want your motion to stay as initially stated, add 6 more hours to the
Correct.
FOS?
Initial motion stands.
And Henry, you second that motion?
Yes.
Okay, so now we have discussion. You know my perspective.
I have to agree. You're cutting into our upper level hours now. You add that many more hours to the FOS, and, I'm almost to the point where we want to accept transfer students in our education program because they will be at such a disadvantage from the FOS.
The other question I think is that you're preparing students to be, this is helping them prepare to be coaches upon graduation, correct?
Teachers and coaches.
Teachers, but, and coaching. So, because it's team and individual sports, right? And so most of them, when they go and become teachers, if they do coach, they are going to coach more team sports probably than individual sports. That's why I tend to like the individual and team sports, because there's more to, the individual sports. How many of those are offered when they go and they become teachers and they start coaching? So that's kind of my perspective, is that their teams, if they do engage in coaching, to be more, team sports, and so that's kind of my thinking there.
Well, there's actually quite a few individual sports out there: tennis, golf, swimming. I mean, we got the big ones, but our purview here is teaching. So if those two classes, as a group agrees, would help prepare a teacher better, then I think they're worth considering. I just think that's a lot.
Also in Texas, their coaches is a stipend. They're physical education teachers that we're preparing to teach. And so that's the degree in education, not coaching. That would just be.
Any other comments?
So I know that those courses are taught at UTSA as faculty there, and they were 3 credits. Now they're only 1. They're taught separately, but we have a dual, we have an individual, and we have a team sports, all taught differently, all taught with theory, all taught with coaching and how to prepare the course. All of them need it. They're all in Kines, they're all majors, Kines majors, so you can't have one without the other. If in the ACGM, it's not a 3-credit course, if it was a 1-credit course each or 2, that may help, because I know UTSA, it's now 1 credit. I know you said yours is still 3 credits, though. I mean, that's one thing to look at, so that we don't lose those courses specifically. The only thing is you're going to be teaching it at a 3-hour level, but it's a 1-credit course, because there's a lot of stuff that goes into those courses. I taught it, I coached for years, so you know what goes into that. But that would be the only, I think, compromise, is if we lower the semester credit hours, if it goes into the ACGM. But I don't know how it's going to affect transferring where it's 3 credit hours in a different institution.
Kingsville has 2, one's a 1 hour and one's a 2 hour. So just echoing your comments, Mary.
Yeah, and some have it as it's a lecture lab, so it's a 2 credit, because that's how they meet it.
Any other comments? Okay, there's a motion been seconded. We've had our discussion. So the motion is to accept 6 additional hours into the FOS with the individual and then another course in terms of team sports. All those in favor of accepting those 6 hours into the FOS, raise your hand. For the education track. That's 10. Those opposed? 5. Abstentions? 1, 2. Motion passes. And that's for the education track. Are there any other suggestions, motions of adding additional courses to either the education or the exercise science track?
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Are there any other motions from anybody to add, whether it be a core class or another kinesiology class, to either the education or the exercise science track, FOS?
Well, let's just stick to education right now.
Okay.
We're maxed out at the kinesiology classes right now because with the education we just approved 18, so
Right.
it would essentially just be core if
Yeah,
we
so
agree
any
upon that.
suggestion for core classes in the education track? None. All right, exercise science on the table. Any suggestions for either core and/or?
Just to completely change the subject, did we want those new ACGM courses to be 2,000 level or 1,000 level? 2, okay. So now we're talking about the science track.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Angela?
I apologize, I need to go back to the minutes. I was just looking at something, and I think there was a mistake on the minutes that impacts this discussion right now. I believe when we approved the science track, that under the activity classes, it was supposed to be exclusive of varsity athletics hours, as it is in the education track. Unfortunately, that word just got omitted. My memory serving me right? Are you with me, Alan?
How did that happen?
In the minutes from our last meeting, the very last page of the minutes of our August 28, 2018. If you flip over to the page, the way mine printed on the education track, under the activity courses, it very clearly says excluding varsity athletic hours, but the word excluding is missing on the science track. I think that's a very noteworthy, oops.
Yes.
The last words under those fitness activity classes, it says varsity athletics hours. The missing word is excluding.
Oh, I see.
And that should be just a correction in the minutes that I'm sorry, I'm just now,
Well, it says excluding these things.
Yes, excluding.
It says excluding skill, recreation, dance, teaching, coaching of, and varsity athletics.
well, see, I put the excluding with those other things and not with varsity athletics. Because on this version, and maybe it's intended to that.
Yeah.
See,
But that's including.
yeah, I know, but I want it to be very clear. It may be meant to, that may be picky, but
Excluding's in the wrong spot. Yeah. Look at the very first person of the sentence. And it got moved to the top.
too many of those things around the country.
Around the world.
Yeah.
Go to Cambodia to the killing fields. Terrible.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but I wanted to say. I see it up there, but.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Back on track.
Back on track, exercise science. Actually, the kinesiology and exercise science, exercise science. Any suggestions or motions toward that FOS?
Do we have the revisions and the concepts of physical fitness, and do we have the learning outcomes for the foundations of, or for the anatomical kinesiology?
No. Yes? Oh, I mean, we hadn't talked about them, but.
Can we delay that till after this?
Yes, I did email them to Alan this morning, so.
I thought yesterday
My
we said we
homework.
would discuss them before.
We were, but I would like to find out first if there's anything else we want to add to this FOS. If not, then we can move on to the next thing. Is there? So is it, are we just saying generally we are accepting the FOS for exercise science as is?
Well, keep in mind that students will have to take something for mathematics. They'll have to take something for social and behavioral sciences. If you don't care what they take, great, leave it blank. Let students have those choice. But if you have a preference that for social and behavioral sciences they take psychology, for example, or sociology, something that might be relevant to exercise science, then now's your chance to say. Or if you have a preference for their mathematics course, now's a chance to kind of use this as a statewide degree plan.
We talked about psychology being on there before, but then we took it out and added the, well, it would be a core class.
Same thing for education, it's
Yeah.
in there.
Yeah. I'm not voting for it, I'm just saying, we had it initially, then we decided to take it out, and we added the kinetic anatomy course.
Yeah. But we have a behavioral science GE class. A&M, don't you have a GE class too? Does it count, or is that an activity class? A behavioral science class. We have a core class that's part of the new, So I would be in favor of not limiting it, because the department might come up with a
We're working
sport and
on,
exercise psychology class that actually counts for GE.
any motions? Okay, Alan Barr, no, being we don't have any motions for that, do we have to vote just to accept this as is? Or can we, Rex, kind of like we did before, are we just all in agreement? There is no real need for a vote? Okay. Okay, so then what we're saying is we've made the addition to the education, add the 6 hours, and we're going to leave the FOS for the exercise science the way it is. Are we all in agreement there? Oh, whether you like it or not. We're not adding anything else. Sorry. Oh, I'm not, okay. Well, I don't mean that kind of agreement. I mean that we're not going to add anything else to it. Okay? All right, we're good there. So, all right. Carolyn, we're going to talk about the 1160.
1164.
1164 and 1338. Starting with 1164, which I did email these documents to you about 5 minutes after the meeting started. So if they want them pulled up, that's the only way I knew to get them to you. The outcomes for 1164, I think, are fine, other than outcome number 5, which states develop an appreciation and positive attitude for healthy lifestyle and the effects of global trends on physical activity. And my argument, the other document has the track changes in it. My argument is that's not measurable, so I think it should just be deleted from the outcomes. That's my only comment there.
Is there a motion to accept? Do you want to make that?
I'm trying to see if anybody agrees with me that developing an appreciation and positive attitude is a measurable outcome. Does anybody agree with me?
Okay. Sherilyn, do you want to make it in terms of a motion?
I can.
Yes.
So I motion that we remove learning outcome number 5 from 1164 that states develop an appreciation and positive attitude for healthy lifestyle, since it's not a measurable outcome.
Is there a second? There is a second. Discussion. Hearing none.
The course you're talking about is 1164 or 1338?
There you go. Can everybody see? Hearing no discussion, we'll call for a vote. All in favor of accepting this deletion of learning objective number 5 from 1164, indicate by raising your hand. Aye. Any against? Any abstentions? One abstention. Motion carries.
My only other comment about the 1164 SLOs is on number 2, when it talks about infectious diseases and addiction. It kind of fits in with the wellness component, but it makes it a little more of a health course.
Any other discussion about 1164?
So are we recommending this to the Learning Outcomes Committee? Okay, because we don't get to make that change. We're just recommending it, okay.
Do you have recommendations or motion for 1338?
So for 1338, myself and 3 other colleagues worked on this last night, so thank you, Mary and Rebecca and Marilyn, for helping me. What we did was we took out a couple and then we added some. So basically what we were trying to do is make concepts of fitness more of a exercise science-based course versus a health course. So we took out some of the wording having to do with infectious diseases and addiction, and we added more in having to do with physiological variables, assessment of fitness, program design, weight management, etc.
So I don't think we want to address every one of those edits. Can we make a motion to globally accept your deletions and your additions to this dialogue?
Sure. So I motion to make recommendations for changes for 1338 as listed.
Second?
Second.
Henry seconds. Discussion? Angela?
Just a question, since I know nothing about this course. What is the preparation of a student? This looks like it's a freshman level class. What would be the background that they would have prior to this class in order to design? The last objective says design and evaluate fitness programs. What background, are there prerequisites to this 1,000-level class?
No, no, there's not. So they're learning basic ACSM guidelines, how to design based on the health-related components of fitness.
So they will not have had any, like AP 1 or 2 or anything? In other words, what's the basis upon which they're building a program out? Their knowledge?
Well,
This is purely at an introductory
this is
level.
an introduction course. They're designing their own workout program. I mean, it doesn't,
Well, there's a difference between the last class, which was designing your own personal fitness program. Maybe I'm misreading number 5 there. Design and evaluate fitness programs, that would require some knowledge. And if this is taken only after an activity class, I would just question what their prerequisite knowledge would be.
I don't believe that the class is an activity class per se. It's a
No.
lecture course. This
No,
is
I'm
a
saying,
lecture
would
course.
they have anything, or could they come in on the first semester and take this class?
That's correct. It is a foundational course.
And I see Angela's point with that. Probably the best thing that we might be able to do and simply say, evaluate fitness programs to promote lifetime.
In that course, though, they're going through the fitness components. They're learning all about what their body is doing physiologically, what's happening when you're doing this, when this and this happens. At the end of the semester, they should be able to design and evaluate their fitness program because they fitness tested. They've gone through all the rigorous stuff lecture-wise, building on it through labs. It's not just throwing them in there and having them design something day one. They would have developed all of this knowledge by the time they get to the end of the course to design their plan.
Tim?
I would just like to state that a little history here. One of the reasons 1338 was created was because a lot of the community colleges were teaching with the same textbook, same lectures, same labs, same everything at 1164. Then they would transfer to university, and the university would not accept that course, and they'd have to retake this course using the same textbook, same lectures, same labs. And so, because they were teaching at a 13 level. So this course was created years back for transferability purposes, really. And the course is pretty much the same that's taught at most of the universities at a freshman or sophomore level. And so it's called different things, concepts, physical fitness, foundations, but it's taught as a freshman and sophomore level course there also. So they're coming in with not much knowledge at the university level and taking the same course.
yeah.
And we
I
had
also
the
wanna-
same issue with that, and you only have to be 18 and pass the test to be a personal trainer.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't agree with that, but it's a fact. And so a lot of our kids are also trying to get jobs. We said, man, we'd like to give them more information than you're going to get from an AFA or ACE and stuff. So we actually created a course like that, Tim, like you were talking about, just to give them that foundational knowledge.
I understand, Angela made a comment about, well, they need testing and prescription, and I've taught testing and prescription at the university level as a senior level class, taught exercise leadership at UNT, which is a senior level application course that's very similar to this. And this is very introduction basic, so they're not learning how to design a workout program for somebody with atherosclerosis or somebody, it's not a special population workout design. It's a very basic program. So I don't know if that needs to be, maybe it should say, would basic program design kind of be a compromise?
I think that's a good addition.
Yeah, I would support that too. I mean, the guidelines for exercise testing and prescription is a pretty big document, and it changes regularly, and you should know anatomy, physiology, biomechanics, motor learning before you try to integrate that stuff together.
And the resource manual, the book, the science background for that is like a 40, 50 chapter book. And so the more we can be honest about this is basic fitness concepts for apparently healthy populations, or introduction to that would be maybe more appropriate.
She asked if I could suggest, so my suggestion is for number 5, it'd say design,
And evaluate.
where it says evaluate, maybe put design and evaluate basic fitness programs
I would just say that
for the
this-
general population.
in the description of the course, you can talk about it as an introductory course, but on the, it would say, design, for apparently healthy populations, based on national standards. So the critical thinking to come up with adaptations and come up with new things yourself is not so much what the course is about. It's just showing, here's where the science base of the field is, and you're going to be going there.
Dwayne, do you want to, so if that last one, design, evaluate basic fitness programs for a general healthy population, or should that be more in the course description, what you're talking about?
I think it can go either way. I mean, it's something that if we give us this sense to the group that will develop this course, they'll.
I think in the SLO makes more sense than in the description.
Okay. So could we page down again? I'll probably have A instead of D.
And I'm not pushing ACSM, but I think ACSM terminology is apparently healthy.
Apparently healthy.
Yeah, that
Okay.
we do a screening to make sure we're not
Programs
taking
for apparently healthy
populations.
population. I'll just say apparently healthy population.
Just task the group to go look at it that's going to develop this. I trust you folks to do it.
Alan, did you take out 4 of the? Or for apparently healthy people? Yeah. Okay. Motion on that? And seconded, right? We have a motion and a second, then we've added some dialogue here, a friendly amendment. Well, with the friendly amendment is the changing of the language in number 5. So our motion is to accept all these edits and changes with the additional friendly amendment to add in SLO number 5. Any other discussion on that? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Yeah, I got 17.
Unanimous?
Yeah, unanimous, yeah. Okay, motion passes.
Thank you, Sherilyn, and others that worked together on this. Appreciate it.
Can we take a 5-minute break, please?
of study for our 2 tracks. That's the bulk and the most important thing that we have to do. What remains is to give some feedback to the upcoming Learning Objectives Committee on what you would like to see in our 3 new courses. We've got anatomical kinesiology, we have teaching of individual sports and teaching of team sports. We don't have to spend time carefully wordsmithing the exact description or the learning objectives, because even if we do that, we don't have the authority to make that decision. That goes to the Learning Objectives Committee. They will pull all the syllabi from across the state for the relevant and similar courses to that. They'll look at the existing course descriptions, the existing learning objectives, and from that arrive at a compromise and a consolidation and a consensus so that those courses are pulled from the collective wisdom of what institutions are already doing. Those will in turn go out for a 30-day public comment period, which will include you. I'll make sure everybody on this committee is notified of the public comment period. And if you have some adjustments or tinkering that you would like to make to those SLOs and the course description, then by all means do so. Is that fair, Rebecca? That's right. When that memo goes out to CAOs and CIOs, so you would need to let your provost know that you would like to be nominated, and then that's where the applications come in. So that'll be coming up. So we don't need to be super specific about those SLOs and course descriptions, but we do need to give them feedback so that the committee knows, for example, what it is we really have in mind when we're doing anatomical kinesiology and the 2 learning courses. So we'll do that now. Okay. Reminder, please, everybody, make sure you're using your microphones, okay?
Alan, I know Henry sent you a description. I just sent you one. Could you let us look at that?
Sure.
See if we're kind of on the same page.
Can I get some
kinetic anatomy for the anatomy course, anatomical kinesiology?
And I sent the ones for physical skills 1 and 2.
Okay.
Not anatomical.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Could I get some clarification? Just because we're proposing these courses, does that mean they will be added to the ACGM once they get through your process, Rebecca?
If they're put on the field of study, if you're including these in your field of study, we're going to develop them so that there's more clarification to the institutions what they need to be teaching in these. That's why I want that overlap with this committee, and why we're going to survey syllabi to make sure that we're adequately addressing that. So yes, they'll go into the ACGM if this committee recommends and the board approves that.
Okay.
Yeah. We won't put them in the ACGM if they're not included in the FOS. So that's the first step. If you want these courses and you want them in the ACGM, you can't just recommend courses into the ACGM. There's a process for that. And then this is a separate process if it's in a field of study. They automatically go in. So we'll do that if it's approved by the board.
Okay, so what you see on the screen is a description of we call it kinetic anatomy, but anatomical kinesiology. So an analysis of skeletal, muscular, and neurological structure and functional aspects of human movement with emphasis on sport and fitness activities. That's prereqs of AMP 1 in our intro to kinesiology.
At Tech, our prerequisite to anatomical kinesiology is AMP 1, AMP 2, and exercise physiology.
But we're just looking at how we describe it at this point, but.
See, also, you have prerequisites there if you feel strongly that this course
Well, I
or the
just
other
copy and
courses.
pasted what's on our syllabus, so,
Okay.
but you asked me to give an idea of what the name or the description would look like. That is what we would.
Well, if you have any strong feelings that there need to be prerequisites too, that's information we can also pass on as a recommendation to the
I know
LO
we would
committees.
want that.
I've got a question. This is usually taught at the upper division.
Yep.
So, but if we're going to put it in the field of study, then prerequisites are generally helpful. So that clarification is good.
And all those prerequisites are undergraduate lower division classes, which they can get at their community college.
Do you know how many schools off the top of your head teach this class specifically, and how many, and are all of them at the upper level?
A kind of approximation of that determination. Universities turn in their course inventories, and that's available on our website. Then you can search by level, and you can search by semester credit hours. But for this one, what I would do is go to our website, look at course inventories, then pull up everything and use the title anatomical or some keywords and do a search and see. And that's how I made that generalized statement that this is generally offered at the upper division, junior level.
There may be some, but I would say this is one of those classes that's usually upper division.
Yeah. Well, we could, I mean.
The reason I asked that is because yesterday Alan said the conventional way of adding a class to ACGM is to have at least 5 institutions, like 4-year institutions that are willing to do so. If we don't have 5 currently teaching it, then we don't even meet the conventional way. So it kind of raises a little problems, in my opinion.
There is a precedent for putting some upper division courses in the fields of study, though. Psychology did it. But it has to be the recommendation of the committee together.
But how would they get it at a community college?
How do they get it at a,
If it's
that's
an
what
upper
I'm
division.
saying. When you put it in the field of study, we're going to make it a freshman or sophomore level course.
But that was the crux from the beginning when we had the discussion, Brett, is that if this is accepted, this is a class that's going to be, yep. And it's, I mean, what you decide to count it for could be something else, and, but you can't, but anyway, that's going to be the choice of the schools when they come in.
Alan, if this becomes a lower division class and we have anatomical kinesiology as a prerequisite to an upper division in our program, would that mean we would have to accept it?
I suppose so, yeah. Am I hearing you right? If anatomical kinesiology is a prerequisite for an upper division class?
Yeah, biomechanics.
Yes.
Right, then if a student comes in with it as part of the field of study, sure, you accept it, right? Wouldn't that be, why wouldn't you? Am I hearing the question? I mean, I'm sorry. Okay. Now, be careful with the prerequisites here, because I noticed just here you have biology. Remember that we already filled in for the student their selection of the life and physical sciences, and the core would be A and P.
That's what that is on our campus.
Okay, just to be clear on that. So you don't
and
want to include a prerequisite.
2313 is our foundation. So you would have to use wording in there,
Sure.
ACGM.
Okay, so just be sure that when you add a prerequisite, that it's not a prerequisite that is not already included in your field of study, because that would
Right.
be really unfair to the students. Okay.
Oh, that was our intro to athletic training, which we no longer do. It's still, I mean,
Yeah,
but I mean, that's when it goes to their committee and they look at all the other degree plans and they'll put in what, and we'll get a chance to chime in. So if we think there should be other prerequisites, we'll be able to say that. Correct?
So for the purpose of this committee, do we?
Could we request that when there's an examination of the existing courses, that all prerequisites be included?
I encourage the learning outcomes to put prerequisites on them.
But what if the
If they
what if the
need 'em.
prerequisites differ?
If they differ from what?
From what's at Corpus Christi?
Yeah, well, I just put it up there to see a description so we can have conversation, but I do believe it should have prerequisites.
The
But
example.
your committee looks at all the different degree plans, so.
Right.
And then they'll decide which
Yes.
prerequisites, and I'm sure if there was across the board, a lot of what you're talking about, that will be on there. If there's something missing on that, when it comes out for public comments, we'll be able to chime in.
Yeah.
So I guess, in terms of a description, are we comfortable with this to move forward to the committee? Or something along that line? So in the sake of
I have
moving
a
forward,
question.
we're going to need a motion. Yes, ma'am.
Aside from the AMP1 and I believe your 1320 is you said foundations? Is that what you?
No, that's 2313. So that's our foundation of kinesiology. The 1320 no longer exists. That was an old description I found in my email.
Okay. So what, just being curious, what other prerequisite would some of you suggest for that?
Some schools would say
anatomical?
AMP 1 and 2. Some may have suggest chemistry. I'm not saying all these are going to be on there. What was another one y'all had, Angela?
Our first level of exercise physiology.
Yeah. So, but we couldn't put anything on there that it would have to be a lower division classes that community colleges could teach. So can I have a motion from someone? I can do it? Oh, I move. I didn't know if I could do that as the chair. Man, I got some power. I move that we, not word for word, but accept this type of statement for the anatomical kinesiology plus requisites that would be deemed necessary by the committee.
Second.
Discussion? Vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Fourteen. Opposed? One. Abstain? One. Motion passes. Would entertain looking at Henry's course description for the individual or the team sports class.
Now we're talking.
Yeah, no kidding. I move we accept these 2 course descriptions for the 2 new courses.
Second.
Discussion?
I have a point of clarification, Henry. I noticed for the Skill 1 course, there's conditioning involved, and there's not conditioning involved for Skill 2. Can you expand? Is it necessary? I just was looking at,
The students are required to take, at our university, 250 before they take 251, so we're assuming that those students have already gone through a process of understanding conditioning techniques that are involved to engage in physical activity.
Well, my motion was to accept the course descriptions. I was not saying that those titles, because our titles are individual sports and team sports. So, and whether one happens before the other doesn't really matter right at this point. I'm just saying I think those course descriptions are good enough to go forward to your committee, and then they can look into more specifics. So that was my motion. Tim?
And also a recommendation would be to put 250 as a prerequisite for 251 when they would be recommended for the committee.
The title of the course that we approved, as I remember, was individual sports, teaching individual sports. And then there was teaching the team sports. What do we do with dual? Now, keep in mind, you may know what to do with it, but students who are coming to this, right, are coming to these course descriptions fresh. They don't know. Where do dual sports belong? Should we change the title of the course from teaching of individual to individual/dual sports? Or does that belong in the course description? Do students know what a dual sport is?
Well, they will after they take the class.
Is a dual sport a team sport?
Well, I mean, there's all kinds of course descriptions, and the kids don't know what that means.
So a dual sport would be tennis, I assume, right?
Sure.
Okay. That's not a team sport, so is that considered an individual sport? If it's
I would have no problems with that course title being individual and dual sports.
I think we know, yeah, people in our.
That fits better there than with a team.
Or if dual is just understood to be included in individual and that can be taken care of in the course description, then you can keep it individual in the title. But I just wanted to bring up the question of dual,
I do
where
think
it belongs.
if they're going to be doing both. Well, I mean, I've seen it listed both ways, Alan. I don't. And really, the key thing for students is what's the course description say and what are the learning outcomes. The title can be a little broader. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I wanted to comment on Tim's suggestion that you take them in sequence or have a prerequisite. I would suggest not to do that just because of facilities. You may have to teach one first other than the other.
I was just trying to address the conditioning in the title, how they're teaching it. They've had that first. So this is just a comment.
Well, we didn't call it conditioning, we call it individual sports. But when their committee pulls all those different descriptions, they may see that that was an integral part of that or choose not to. But I agree, with Carolyn, I don't think, at least for us building two classes at this point, that one should happen before the other. Any more discussion? All right. All those in favor of accepting these course descriptions to get the process started, please raise your hand. I'm not counting. Okay. And opposed? One. And abstain? One. Motion passes. Alan, is there zip codes? I'm oblivious on those. So what do we need to decide on the zip codes?
first, did we decide to change the title of that course to individual dual, or just keep it individual sports? Teaching of individual sports or teaching of individual dual sports?
We're going to wait and see on that.
Or just leave that up to the,
Well, we can decide now. I mean, I move that the individual sports class be called individual dual sports. There, you got a second. Discussion? All those in favor? Teaching of individual dual sports. Amen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Oh my God, we agree. Opposed? 1. Abstain? 1. Motion passes. I also move that we, on the other class, have changed the title to Teaching of Team Sports.
Second.
I don't know if we have it on there or not, but is it already listed that way?
Yeah, it's
Never
already
mind.
listed, yeah.
Okay,
Withdraw.
now zip codes.
Withdrawn.
Withdrawn.
exercise physiology. That we, in previous discussion, the consensus was these are primarily graduate programs, right? Science-based graduate programs. Apparently,
I
we only
would
have 2 baccalaureate
argue
programs.
against that because, again, we're again tying departments' hands, and if by some chance of political fate, a department in one of our public institutions gets farmed or broken apart and put in a science college, and their dean wants them to have that zip code, we don't want, I mean, the CIP system is just a reporting system for the federal government. It's just, again, being punished for good behavior. Is it now over time? Now these things have gained extra power, and they've have money attached to them at private and public institutions, and all of these are kinesiology. In fact, the cross-links, cross-references in the old and probably the new 2020 versions will have cross-links between all these different zip codes. So many of them in the proposal have added kinesiology to them, and if they don't, and if the 626, it'll probably have a cross-link that says that's the same as kinesiology and exercise science, or C also, giving the sense that it could be reported either way. And it's just more crazy numbers going to the federal government. We don't know what they are.
Angela?
I think it would be helpful if our kinesiology field of study committee would consider making a recommendation that at least the coordinating board consider those pre-professional areas that are very science-rich, that prepare students for graduate school, would consider reclassifying for Texas reporting purposes, as Dwayne said, and for future STEM funding purposes, a change in that zip code.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
Second?
Well, the coordinating board can't do that. That's got to come from the institutions. And if the institution wants to change CIP code, they can, and they make a justification for that and send it to the coordinating board, and we approve it or disapprove it. But the coordinating board can't make a general, as far as I know, a general sweeping policy change like that about CIP codes. We don't run the CIP codes. It's a federal thing. It's a national thing. The classification of instructional
I believe Angela was
programs.
just saying that they would, this committee is recommending they look into that.
Well, the
can't make a
committee could
recommendation.
recommend that institutions reconsider their CIP codes, but you
Okay.
can't really recommend that the coordinating board make a
Well, on my
policy change.
campus, I was told that we had to communicate through the coordinating board before we could do anything on campus. Is that?
That's not my understanding, Rebecca.
My understanding of this process is when we get a program proposal,
No,
The
it's an
inst-
existing program.
write an existing program. If you want to change your SIP, we'll get a proposal from an institution, and we'll examine that and see what the institution is supporting that change with. And we'll do some research. We'll look at what is the commonly used for the same kind of program. We'll look across the state and also out of the state to see what trends are. We'll look on professional organization sites. We do research. I'm not going to say how the conclusion is, but this has to be generated from the institution. The coordinating board doesn't come over everyone and say, these kind of programs are going to be under this SIP. This is generated from faculty at the institution pushing it forward. So, I mean, we wouldn't do it, like I said, and Alan has indicated, we don't do it wholesale and say, change your SIP. It's the institutions, and they can change, they can bring forward a proposal and substantiate a need through all this research and documentation of some kind of change in the field that's legitimate and documented. Then they'll get a change. I know that it happens, but it happens infrequently where there'll be a little tweak in a SIP area. But it has to be originated at the institutional level. We don't just impose the will of the coordinating board, and I don't think they really have any interest in doing this, to tell you the truth, because we want to hear from the faculty who are designing the program, who teach the courses. That seems to be the appropriate source for this, and there is a process to do that. If you think your program needs to be in SIP 26, then provide us with that information and we'll review that. And otherwise, we're not going to mess with someone else's program.
But what I heard you say is the institution can't do it without the coordinating board's permission.
It has to go through an approval process, but even then it has to originate with an institution. So if the institution has to do research and the coordinating board has to do research to come up with some kind of, and we work with institutions. We ask them for more clarification on the reason for that. It's not an open and shut yes or no, is what I'm saying, is that there's a lot of background investigation and research into this. Well, that doesn't mean that you're going to get the answer you want. That's true.
We've attempted to go through the coordinating board and have yet to get a response from Dr. Peoples, and I talked with him again yesterday. But it's a catch-22, because if you look at the list that Alan provided, it is unanimous. In the state of Texas, everything, when a lot of the physical education programs evolved into kinesiology programs, as Dwayne has articulated, they've all been put under the 31. So if the coordinating board staff does its research and look across the state of Texas, they're going to see 3105. So does Texas Tech or any other UT or whatever, in order to bring that up, unless we try to do it in some kind of concerted fashion. We tried with the largest institutions in the state and haven't gotten a response yet. What I was suggesting is maybe there could be an outgrowth of this particular committee that would support for those programs that we just excluded from this FOS, that they would gain some support at the coordinating board about that. But again, if you look across the state, it's not going to do Texas Tech or anybody else any good, because they would be the lone person at the bachelor's level.
I'm going to speak here because when they choose the groups they're doing, they are looking at SIPs. He's looking at a general area, and then he asks for feedback from this group. If there was an overwhelming, I don't know that there's no evidence that we have, and the programs that are represented here are all under that 31 SIP. Is that correct, Alan?
Yes.
Okay.
If I'm hearing you correctly, I agree with you. I think it would be interesting if, this is a hypothetical situation here, if institutions across the state, if in one of your conferences, for example, one of your state conferences, this was brought up, and maybe one of the state organizations were to make a recommendations that since we're excluding the pre-professional programs, okay, the pre-PT, the pre-OT programs, for example, pre-chiropractic programs, we're excluding those from the field of study. What if those degree programs were to collectively decide that they wanted to be in the 260908 zip code? Which kind of makes sense because they are exercise physiology of a sense. And then we could exclude that CIP code very easily with a slice right from our FOS. Say programs in this CIP code don't apply. The physical education, the exercise science programs that do logically fit in 310501 and 310504, et cetera, and 310505, of course, are included in the field of study. That's something the coordinating board can't do, but I think your institutions collectively could. If you were to send us a memo, if institutions were to get together and coordinate this and tell the coordinating board, we would like to start moving these pre-professional programs to a different CIP code, that would be interesting, and I think we'd be amenable to talking with institutions about that. It's consistent, and it's logical, and it makes things clearer for institutions across the state about where the FOS does and doesn't apply. So I agree with you, but that's got to be something that's got to be a groundswell thing that comes from the bottom up, not from the top down. But I like the idea. I think it's got some merit to it.
I'll withdraw my motion.
So withdrawn. Last thing on our agenda is consideration of authorization of co-chairs to approve the meeting minutes for this meeting, make non-substantive edits to documents, and conduct a sort of committee business-related submission of the study to the coordinating board for approval.
Well, before we leave this, let me just clear this up here. So are we excluding exercise physiology, excluding 260908 from our FOS? Or do these two baccalaureate programs need to be included?
I don't think we should exclude them until we hear from them. They have, I mean, literally, like I said before, kinesiology exists in all those zip codes.
Right.
And they may be heavily science-based and want to be called kinesiology even though, or they might be called exercise science even though the zip code in most of their courses and the degree program itself says exercise physiology.
Okay. And yes for 310501? I think that's just UT Austin's program because they have a different name for it. And we are not doing sport administration and management, as I understand it, right? And of course, we're doing 310505. And coaching doesn't really apply because we don't have any programs in that in Texas, so I'm just going to leave that off. Okay, look good?
So you said yesterday that if we made substantive changes, that it would go out, the FOS would go out for comment again, and that's what's going to happen? Because
Since we've added 2 new courses to the
Right,
education
okay.
track, that's a substantive change, yeah.
Thanks.
I don't think we really made a substantive change to the science track because all we did was we added 1 course to the list of activities courses. You know, it's a change, but it's not a heavy-duty change. But since it's going to have to go out for education anyway, I think we might as well send both tracks out and see what happens.
So I just want to reiterate what I asked you the other day. So that means that it's going back out for public comment, and you're going to get a firestorm of public comments again from both ends. Anyway, that means we'll need to meet again to discuss those, correct?
Well, it depends. If we get a fire, like you said, if we get a firestorm of public comments, then yes, I think we need to go on the public record and talk about them. If there's a lot of pushback about the 2 new teaching of dual individual sports and team sports, and if I send it out in a ballot and we have another 7-6 split, 10-12 split or a tie vote, then yeah, we'll come back and talk about it. If, however, we get a handful of public comments. People are saying pretty much the same thing they already said before, which we did go through here today, and we don't get substantive new public comments. And if there seems to be uniform agreement on the committee, if the committee votes 22-1 to keep our courses the way we originally proposed them, then in that case, I'll have to talk with Rex about it and other administrators here. But in that case, perhaps we wouldn't bring everybody back. We're going to be sensitive to the fact that we've imposed upon your time and institutions' money a great deal for this committee. We're not going to bring you back lightly. On the other hand, as I said yesterday, the coordinating board takes very seriously our responsibility to make sure institutions know that their public comments are heard and duly considered, and that our deliberations are on the public record. So we'll weigh those two considerations together, and in consultation with the co-chairs, and perhaps with a ballot or a doodle poll that I'll send to each of you, we'll get a consensus about what the best and most fair way is to go forward.
Well, I would recommend, I don't know if you could do it this way or not, but when you send that out, to have some wording in there that the FOS has already been addressed, all those comments. These are the 2 new courses, and we're asking for feedback about the addition of these 2 courses to the Education FOS. And not have to, that don't mean some goose not going to do it, but I mean, it would be nice that all the comments would be segregated just on the addition of these 2. Is that possible to word it that way? Or do you have to put the whole FOS back up there, or?
I think we have to, we'll have to put the whole FOS up for people who may not have commented on it the first times. But I think you're absolutely right. I think it would be a good idea to state clearly at the beginning in the cover memo, here's a summary of what we changed. The committee decided not to change anything in the science track, with the exception of adding physical wellness to the list of activities courses. And then we'll say, for our education track, we are proposing adding these 2 new courses. We invite your feedback on this, and then summarize what's the same and what's different.
Okay, good.
And
That could be
hopefully,
very helpful.
I mean, anybody's welcome to apply, but maybe some institutions who have already weighed in twice on the field of study will decide that especially since the science track hasn't changed, that there's nothing new to say about it apart from what they already did. So that may cut down on the number of comments. But I don't mind. I mean, more public comments is good. I mean, I'm not afraid of getting lots of public comments. I think it's great that we get the feedback from institutions, because as you all have made abundantly clear, there's so much variety across the state. There's so much at stake here. The discipline is shifting. There are differences between the way these programs are evolving or changing from physical education only to science-based kinesiology professional programs, that the more feedback we get, the better. If we have to come back, then we have to come back, but we're going to not do that. Again, like I said, not going to call you back lightly.
Is there going to be, since it wasn't in ACGM previously, the new edition of the anatomical kinesiology, would that be going out for comment? And how it's going to be, we're proposing to include in ACGM and get the feedback of the current institutions that teach it at the upper level, what their concern would be? Right.
It's going to kind of go out for public comment twice. You're right. It's going to go out once from us, where people can weigh in on the existence of these 2 new teaching of courses. And it'll go out another time after the Learning Objectives Committee has finished wordsmithing it and putting it together. So, right, we'll get double feedback. That's a good thought. Perhaps this committee, if we have to come back at all, we shouldn't come back until after the Learning Objectives Committee has met and made their changes, and those have gone out for public comment, so that we would have the benefit of knowing that we are working with the final approved, courses. I don't know, Rebecca and I would have to, work carefully on our scheduling on that to see how it goes. Okay. If we come back for another meeting, it will have been 2 full years, I think, since we had our first meeting, right? Yeah. In which case the terms of our co-chairs will have expired. So we will need to either re-elect or elect new co-chairs if we have another meeting. we could either do that now in advance of that possibility, or we could wait and see if we have another meeting, and then at the beginning of that meeting, elect 2 new co-chairs at that time.
Well, my wife constantly calls me a masochist, so I would agree to keep serving in this capacity if y'all want to.
Well, what's the committee's sense? Would you rather elect new co-chairs now that would take effect 2 years from whenever it was we had our first meeting, which was February 2018. So as of February 2020, which is what, July, August, September, October, November, December, January, February, 8 months from now, we'll need new co-chairs. I don't know. 8 months is a long time. We'll get this done in 8 months, don't you think?
Yeah.
I may change my mind by then.
Yeah. Don't commit
I'm not wishing it a bad luck.
I know. Anyway.
It's possible that if this is still going through the board cycle, we would have
I think that's it.
still some duties for the co-chairs to do 8 months from now after this is expired. So, I don't know.
Okay. All right, if there's anything else, Alan, from you?
Well, yeah, just this. Do we want to go ahead and elect our co-chairs now, taking effect February 1st, 2020?
Wait till the next time we have to meet.
Well, see, there's duties of the co-chairs around the meeting, like putting the meeting together, working with the agenda, discussion of how things are going to go, et cetera, et cetera.
I guess the question is, when will this information go to the Learning Objectives Committee? Because if we're not going to meet until after they meet.
Need internal discussions about that because timing is important. And at this point, what if all the feedback was, we hate those courses and we've spent money to bring in the learning objectives people to develop those courses, and then it turns out because of public comment for your group that they rejected them. Yeah, so, it's kind of difficult to know. But the general idea is that if it's approved, if this one goes out to comment and comes back and is approved by December, then it would go into effect the following, December, January, it's going to be another year. I don't know how you could get it to the board any quicker.
Yeah, that's true. So I think we should probably elect co-chairs for terms effective February 1st in case we need it. If we don't need it, fine, but if we do, we've got it in place. So do we have nominations from the floor for our co-chairs? We need one nominee for our 4-year institutions and one nominee for the 2-year institutions. So we'll take the 4-year institutions first.
I nominate Randy Bonnet.
Okay, Randy's been nominated. Do we have any other nominations representing the 4 years?
Say I never gave you anything.
I know. I love you, PJ.
Okay. Then all in favor of Dr. Bonnet? Okay. Great, thank you. Now nominations for the co-chair representing the 2-year institutions. Any
I
nominees?
recommend Carolyn.
Nomination of Carolyn.
I don't want to go down by myself.
I'll second.
Okay. Any other nominations for a 2-year rep?
Gluttons.
Okay.
Accept the nomination.
I was going to say, Carolyn, this is your
accept.
chance. Okay. Okay, well, thank you. All in favor of Carolyn Mock then? Okay, tremendous. Well, thank you. Thank you both for serving. This is tremendous. Our last item of business, as Randy said, is to authorize the co-chairs on your behalf to take care of incidental business, non-substantive changes to the wording in the field of study, so that we don't have to call you all back for purposes of Public Meetings Act to make relatively small changes. If there's anything significant, of course, I would poll you about that to get your opinions so that your opinions could inform the decisions of the co-chairs. But it would be the authority of the co-chair that you are giving them to allow them to actually make that change on behalf of the committee. This is, I know it's a technical thing, but it helps keeps us in compliance with Open Meetings Act. So do we have a motion to that effect?
Second.
Okay, and then all in favor of that motion?
Aye.
Okay, that's our last official business. Any other thing for the good of the committee or from our chairs?
Two things. One, I've said it before, and why this is so difficult is there's just such diversity in kinesiology programs across the state, but that's a good thing. All the hard work faculty put in together to address the needs of their specific institution. So I just think that is a great thing. Applaud all you and your programs that are out there. They're outstanding. And just want to say thank you for y'all taking the time to come up here and to agree and disagree as professionals and not let emotions get in the way. And so thank you for that.
I want to thank Randy and Carolyn for taking this on yet again.
Well,
I know it's probably not easy, and
I want to thank you all too. This is an incredible task we're undertaking, and we're not done yet, so keep the faith.
Yes. I know. Can I have a motion? I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All done.
Thanks again to everybody and safe travels back.